The year is 1191. After a long and arduous journey, Richard the Lionheart, King of England, has arrived in the Holy Land. The siege of Acre, a pivotal port city, drags on, testing the Crusaders' resolve. Richard's presence injects a renewed sense of purpose, yet beneath the surface of unity, deep divisions simmer among the various factions. The Crusader camp is a microcosm of Europe itself, a melting pot of languages, customs, and ambitions. Knights from France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire jostle for position and resources, each with their own agenda and loyalties. Richard, a shrewd observer of men, understands the need to forge these disparate elements into a cohesive fighting force. Among Richard's most trusted knights is Sir Reginald de Courtenay, a warrior renowned for his courage and unwavering loyalty. Reginald's battlefield prowess is matched only by his sense of duty, making him a valuable asset in the king's eyes. Summoned to Richard's command tent, Reginald awaits his king's orders. The air is thick with anticipation, the weight of the crusade heavy on their shoulders. Richard begins, his voice low and serious, outlining his concerns about Saladin's strategy. Saladin is a cunning adversary, Richard declares, his gaze intense. We must anticipate his moves, understand his defenses if we are to ever retake Jerusalem. He then reveals a secret. Intelligence suggests Saladin is planning a major strategic maneuver, the details of which remain shrouded in mystery. Reginald listens intently, his mind already strategizing. "What does your Majesty require of me?" he asks, his voice firm and resolute, his loyalty unwavering. "I need you to uncover Saladin's plans, Reginald," Richard says, his voice laced with urgency. "I need you to infiltrate his network and discover his intentions for Jerusalem. This is not a task for an open charge, but for stealth and cunning." Reginald hesitates. Espionage is not his forte. He is a warrior, a knight, accustomed to open combat, not shadowy intrigue. The king's request pulls him out of his comfort zone. The notion of subterfuge and deception sits uneasily with his sense of honor. "I understand your reservations, Reginald," Richard says, his voice softening. "But this is a different kind of battle, a battle fought in the shadows. Your courage and loyalty are needed, not just on the battlefield but in the murky world of espionage." Reginald, despite his initial reluctance, recognizes the importance of the mission. The fate of the crusade, perhaps even the Holy Land itself, may rest on his shoulders. His sense of duty overrides his personal discomfort. "Very well, Reginald," Richard says, his tone regaining its commanding edge. "This scroll contains your initial instructions and contacts. You will leave for Ascalon at dawn. May God be with you." Reginald accepts the scroll, the weight of responsibility heavy in his hands. He bows his head in acknowledgement, his mind already racing with the challenges ahead. He is no longer simply a knight. He is an agent in the shadows, embarking on a dangerous game of espionage. The Third Crusade is about to enter a new, treacherous phase. Acre, newly won but far from tamed. The air was thick with the smell of spices, sweat, and simmering resentment. Richard had taken the city, but its secrets remained buried deep. It was here, in this den of intrigue, that my search for Saladin's plans would begin. My first attempts to recruit informants were met with suspicion. The locals, both Christian and Muslim, were wary of outsiders, especially one bearing the crest of Courtenay. Trust was a rare commodity in Acre, bought only with coin or more often fear. A grizzled sailor, more drunk than sober, offered a sliver of information. He spoke of a figure known only as the Falcon, a man with deep ties to Saladin's court, and a network of spies stretching across the Holy Land. Little did Reginald know, Sheikh Khalil al-Masri, the Falcon, was working on plans of his own. He was laying the groundwork for sowing seeds of discontent among the Crusader ranks. The Falcon intrigued me. If I could find him, I might find Saladin's strategy, but finding a ghost in a city teeming with spies was a daunting task. I needed a new approach. Then, like a beacon in the darkness, came an invitation. Isabella of Jerusalem requested my presence. I had met her briefly before, but this felt different, charged with an unknown purpose. I found Isabella in the midst of court, a whirlwind of silks and whispers. She dismissed her attendants with a flick of her wrist, turning her full attention to me. "Sir Reginald," she began, her voice like velvet, "I hear you seek information. Acre is a city of secrets, and some are best left undisturbed." Her words were a veiled warning, or perhaps an invitation. I couldn't be sure. Isabella was a woman of many layers, each concealing another. "There are those in Acre who would see both Crusader and Muslim bleed. Be wary, Sir Reginald. The serpent wears many faces." Isabella's warning hung heavy in the air. Who was the serpent she spoke of? And what game was she playing? I left the court more confused than enlightened. One thing was clear. Acre was more than just a conquered city. It was a chessboard, and I was but a pawn in a game far grander and more dangerous than I could have imagined. And Isabella, with her beauty and her secrets, was surely one of the key players. Acre, though under Crusader control, teemed with shadows. Reginald, his mission clear, sought whispers of the Falcon, a phantom whose influence seemed to permeate every corner of the city. He needed a lead, a thread to pull. A shifty-eyed merchant, smelling of spices and sweat, claimed to know of the Falcon's movements. "Information comes at a price, knight," he rasped, his gaze darting around nervously. Reginald offered a purse of silver, a sum that made the merchant's eyes widen. Unseen, lurking in the shadows, Sheikh Khalil al-Masri observed the exchange. His presence was a ghost, a silent warning that Reginald was far from alone in this game of shadows. The merchant's information led Reginald to a seedy part of Acre, a labyrinth of narrow alleys and crumbling buildings. Doubt gnawed at him. Was this a genuine lead or a carefully laid trap? Suddenly the alley erupted in violence. Figures emerged from the shadows, their faces hidden, their daggers glinting in the dim light. The merchant had betrayed him. This was an ambush. Reginald, though outnumbered, was a seasoned warrior. He drew his sword, the steel singing as it left its scabbard, and met the attackers with a roar. He moved with a speed that belied his size, deflecting blows and landing strikes of his own. The alley became a dance of death. Steel clashed against steel, and the air filled with the grunts of exertion and the sickening thud of flesh meeting blade. One attacker fell, but others pressed on, driven by a fanaticism that chilled Reginald to the bone. Finally, with a desperate lunge, Reginald broke through their ranks. The remaining attackers scattered, melting back into the shadows from whence they came. He stood alone, breathing heavily, his body aching but alive. The trap had failed, but at a cost. Reginald, after tending to his wounds, found the merchant cowering in the marketplace. He was quickly apprehended by Crusader soldiers. Justice would be swift, but it wouldn't bring back the time lost, nor reveal the Falcon's true identity. Reginald presented the dagger to Richard. "Saladin's agents are embedded within Acre, your majesty," he reported. "They knew of my pursuit of the Falcon and laid a trap." Richard listened intently, his brow furrowed. The stakes had just been raised. Unbeknownst to Reginald, Sheik Kalo watched from afar, a ghost in the night. The failed ambush was a setback, but only a minor one. The falcon's shadow still loomed large, and the game was far from over. The Crusaders thought they controlled Acre, but Kalo knew the city was full of secrets that were yet to be revealed. The air in the merchant's stall was thick with fear, and the scent of spices. Reginald pressed the man for details about the falcon, knowing that every whisper could be the key to unraveling Saladin's web. The merchant, his voice barely audible, spoke of coded messages, clandestine meetings, and the falcon's uncanny ability to anticipate Crusader movements. The extent of Saladin's intelligence network was becoming terrifyingly clear. Reginald paid the merchant handsomely, knowing the information came at a price, both for the seller and potentially for himself. Every piece of the puzzle was valuable, no matter how small. Reginald stepped back into the crowded marketplace. The city, though conquered, remained a melting pot of cultures and loyalties, a perfect hunting ground for spies and secrets. He moved through the throng, his senses alert. He had to find a way to penetrate the falcon's network, to turn the tables on Saladin's intelligence operations. Near a spice merchant, a man stood quietly, seemingly examining the wares. He was Sheik Khalil al-Masri, a figure known for his wisdom and respect among the local populace. Khalil's gaze met Reginald's for a fleeting moment. There was something knowing in his eyes, a subtle intelligence that set Reginald on edge. Reginald watched Khalil. He was too close to the merchant's stall during their conversation, his interest too keen to be mere coincidence. Suspicion began to take root. Khalil, seemingly oblivious to Reginald's scrutiny, engaged in conversation with a local vendor. He was a respected figure, integrated into the very fabric of Acre. Reginald decided to approach Khalil. He needed to gauge the man's true intentions, to understand if he was merely an innocent bystander or a key player in Saladin's game. "Sheik Khalil," Reginald said, his voice low but firm. "I couldn't help but notice your interest in my conversation. Do you have any knowledge of the falcon I should be aware of?" Khalil chuckled softly. "Knowledge, Sir Knight, is a dangerous thing. Some seek it, others hide it. Whether I possess any regarding this falcon is a question I'm not yet ready to answer." Reginald maintained a discreet distance, his senses on high alert. He was determined to unravel the enigma that was Sheik Khalil. The man moved with a purpose that belied his unassuming appearance, weaving through the crowded marketplace like a serpent through reeds. Khalil disappeared into a nondescript building tucked away in a labyrinthine alley. Reginald waited, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword, the silence broken only by the distant cries of gulls. An hour passed. Reginald saw messengers come and go, their faces hidden beneath cloaks. He was certain that this was no ordinary residence. This was a node in Khalil's network. Under the cloak of night, Khalil emerged and met with a hooded figure near the city walls. The exchange was brief, furtive, and laden with secrecy. Reginald shadowed the hooded figure, while being careful to keep Khalil at a distance. The figure led him to a hidden passage leading out of the city. Where he was going, Reginald did not know, but the game had moved from the shadows to the desert sands. The hooded figure arrived at Saladin's encampment. The message was delivered. Reginald now knew that Khalil was not merely an informant, but a direct line to Saladin himself. Back in Acre, Khalil was seen whispering in the ear of a Crusader knight. Reginald strained to hear their words but was too far away. Whatever Khalil was saying, it seemed to be having an effect. Soon after, dissension began to spread among the Crusader ranks. Accusations flew, old grievances resurfaced, and alliances fractured. Khalil's poisonous words had taken root. Isabella observed the growing discord with evident concern. She knew that a divided Crusader army was a vulnerable one. The fate of Jerusalem hung in the balance. Reginald cornered Khalil in a secluded alley. "You sow discord, Khalil. You poison the minds of men with lies." Khalil merely smiled, a cold, unsettling expression. "Truth is a weapon, Reginald," Khalil replied, "and I wield it with skill. You seek Jerusalem, but you are tearing yourselves apart from the inside." Reginald drew his sword, the steel whispering from its scabbard. "Then let us see whose weapon is sharper, Khalil, your lies or my steel." Reginald set his sights southward towards Jerusalem. Each league closed was a gamble, each shadow potentially concealing friend or foe. The closer he drew to the holy city, the more palpable the tension became. A Crusader patrol crested the ridge ahead. Reginald quickly led his horse into a deep ravine, the shadows offering temporary concealment. He couldn't risk being delayed or, worse, questioned about his solitary journey. Emerging from the ravine, he found the open plains patrolled by Saladin's scouts. Their vigilance was a testament to the Ayyubid Sultan's keen awareness. Reginald needed a safer path, one that wouldn't lead to an untimely encounter. He chose a winding path, barely a track, known only to local shepherds and desert travelers. Progress was slow, but concealment was paramount. Each step was a calculated risk. Within Jerusalem's walls, Isabella watched as life continued under the looming shadow of impending war. Her position granted her insights into the city's defenses and the mood of its people. Reginald found Isabella in her private chambers, her demeanor betraying the weight of her responsibilities. "You are here," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and relief. "The city prepares for the inevitable," Isabella began, gesturing for Reginald to sit. "Saladin's forces are well entrenched and the people are divided." Reginald listened carefully, his steel-gray eyes fixed on Isabella's face. He needed to glean every possible detail about Jerusalem's defenses and the political undercurrents at play. "Khalil, he is not what he seems. His influence in Saladin's court is greater than any realize, and his words carry weight. I believe he has been manipulating events to his own ends." Unbeknownst to Reginald, Khalil was also in Jerusalem, a silent observer in the city's shadows. His plans were nearing fruition, and the stage was set for the next act of his deception. Isabella's confirmation solidified Reginald's suspicions. Khalil was not merely a messenger or diplomat. He was a master manipulator, weaving a web of deceit that threatened the entire crusade. Reginald departed, his mind racing. He now had a clearer picture of the forces at play both within and outside Jerusalem. The game had changed and the stakes were higher than ever. Khalil had to be stopped, no matter the cost. Espionage, a city caught between empires. Reginald approached with a grim determination, the weight of his mission pressing down on him. He knew Khalil's network was deeply embedded here, a viper's nest he intended to dismantle. Information was currency in Espionage. Reginald, relying on contacts cultivated during previous campaigns, met with a local merchant known for his intricate knowledge of the city's underbelly. He sought details about Khalil's operations, any weakness he could exploit. Khalil, the ever-watchful spymaster, oversaw his network with meticulous care. His agents were his eyes and ears, feeding him information from every corner of the city. He anticipated Reginald's arrival, prepared for any disruption to his plans. Reginald learned that Khalil used an old network of aqueducts to move men and messages unseen. It was a risky venture, but it could provide access to the heart of his operation. The aqueducts were a labyrinth of darkness and dampness. Each step Reginald took was a gamble, unsure of what awaited him around the next bend. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the drip of water and the echo of his own breath. News of Reginald's movements reached Khalil swiftly. His network was vast, and his agents were loyal. He knew the night was a threat, a danger to his carefully constructed web of deceit. Luck, it seemed, was on Reginald's side. He overheard two of Khalil's men discussing a plan to ambush a Crusader supply train. He had found the information he sought, but a moral question arose. To warn the convoy would reveal his presence, potentially jeopardizing his mission to uncover Khalil's plans. But to stand by and let the ambush occur was a betrayal of his oath, a stain on his honor. He was trapped between duty and morality. Reginald chose to act. He couldn't stand idly by while innocent lives were at stake. He emerged from the aqueducts and sought out a reliable messenger, entrusting him with a warning for the Crusader convoy. Khalil received the news with barely concealed fury. His ambush had been foiled, his plans disrupted. He knew Reginald was responsible, and his anger burned with a cold intensity. Khalil retaliated swiftly. Reginald found himself ambushed in the narrow streets of Escalon, surrounded by a group of Khalil's most ruthless assassins. A desperate fight for survival began. Reginald fought with the ferocity of a cornered lion. He dispatched his attackers, but the encounter left him wounded and exposed. He knew Khalil wouldn't stop. Their conflict had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. Reginald, fueled by the evidence he'd gathered, stormed into the heart of the Escalon citadel, determined to confront Sheikh Khalil. His hand gripped his sword, his resolve as firm as the stone beneath his feet. Khalil, seemingly unfazed by Reginald's sudden entrance, stood by a window, gazing out at Escalon. A faint smile played on his lips, a mask that hid his true intentions. "Sheikh Khalil," Reginald spat, his voice laced with venom. "Your treachery ends here. I know of your dealings with Saladin, the false information you spread amongst our ranks, the discord you sowed." Khalil raised an eyebrow, a look of amusement crossing his face. "Treachery, Sir Knight, or loyalty to my people. Saladin seeks only to reclaim what is rightfully ours. Jerusalem is our heritage." Reginald lunged forward, attempting to seize Khalil. "Your words are poison, Khalil. You will answer for your crimes." Khalil, surprisingly agile for his age, deftly sidestepped Reginald's attack. "You underestimate Saladin's preparations, Sir Knight. Jerusalem is fortified beyond your wildest imaginings. Every stone, every street, is a trap for the unwary Crusader." As Reginald grappled with Khalil, guards swarmed into the chamber, their scimitars flashing in the dim light. A fierce sword fight erupted, the clang of steel echoing through the citadel. Using the chaos as cover, Khalil slipped away, disappearing into the shadows like a phantom. Reginald, momentarily distracted by the guards, watched in frustration as his quarry vanished. Reginald, victorious but enraged, stood amidst the fallen guards, his sword dripping with blood. Khalil had escaped, but he wouldn't leave empty-handed. Searching the chamber, Reginald discovered a hidden compartment behind a tapestry. Inside, he found a collection of scrolls and maps, detailing Saladin's strategic plans for the defense of Jerusalem. The maps revealed a city prepared for a siege of epic proportions. Every gate, every wall, every alleyway was accounted for. Saladin had anticipated a crusader assault and meticulously planned his defense. Clutching the stolen documents, Reginald knew he held the key to Jerusalem's fate. Khalil's escape stung, but the knowledge he'd gained was invaluable. He had a duty to deliver this information to Richard, to give the Crusader army a fighting chance against Saladin's formidable defenses. Reginald pressed onward, the weight of the documents a physical burden mirroring the moral one he carried. Acre beckoned, the promise of delivering vital intelligence a beacon in the harsh reality of the crusade. Richard, ever the strategist, pored over the maps of the Holy Land, planning his next moves. The constant threat of Saladin's forces weighed heavily on his mind. Reginald stood before Richard, the captured documents held out in offering. "Your Majesty," he began, "these detail Saladin's strategy and Khalil's treachery." Richard scanned the documents, his expression hardening as he absorbed the details of Saladin's plans and Khalil's manipulation. The extent of the betrayal was far greater than he had imagined. Richard, having digested the intelligence, began to outline his revised strategy. Reginald listened intently, understanding the implications of their altered course of action. Orders were barked, lines redrawn, and supply routes reevaluated. Richard, fueled by Reginald's findings, was a whirlwind of decisive action. As the camp settled for the night, Reginald walked alone, the sounds of soldiers preparing for rest fading into a dull hum. Victory was at hand, but at what cost? He thought of Khalil, of Isabella, of the lives caught in the crossfire of ambition and faith. The lines between right and wrong had blurred in this conflict, and Reginald struggled to find his footing. Richard, ever focused on the objective, saw only the path to Jerusalem. The moral complexities were a luxury he could not afford. Reginald sharpened his sword, the steel gleaming in the dim light. He was a knight, a soldier, and his duty was clear. But the shadows of espionage lingered, a constant reminder of the price of victory. The army marched on, their destination Jerusalem. The intelligence Reginald had provided had shifted the balance, but the war was far from over. The holy city remained a distant, shimmering prize. Reginald rode beside Richard, the weight of his actions a heavy presence. He had served his king and his cause, but the moral ambiguities of the crusade would forever haunt him. The price of victory, he knew, was often paid in the currency of conscience. The year is 1192. The air hung heavy with the scent of dust and the unspoken tension of two mighty armies poised on the brink of either annihilation or accord. The stage was set for the Treaty of Ramla, a truce born not of decisive victory, but of exhaustion and mutual respect for the power held by each side. After all the battles, betrayals, and bloodshed, the crusade was coming to an end. Within the Ayyubid lines, Saladin reviewed the terms one last time. His gaze was fixed, not on the lands conceded, but on the lives spared. Jerusalem would remain under Muslim control, but Christians would be granted access. A fragile peace, but peace nonetheless. Reginald watched as the delegates gathered. Richard's representatives, weary and eager to return home, met with Saladin's envoys, men as proud and unyielding as their leader. The fate of the Holy Land hung in the balance, dependent on the strokes of a quill and the promises sworn before God. Isabella observed with a keen eye. Her kingdom, though diminished, would endure. The treaty offered a respite, a chance to rebuild and consolidate power along the coast. But she knew, deep in her heart, that this was not an end, merely a pause in the long struggle for Jerusalem. Reginald's mind wandered back through the events that led to this moment. The whispers in Acre, the betrayal in Ascalon, the deadly game of shadows he had been forced to play. How many lives had been lost or spared because of the information he gathered, the plots he uncovered? Unseen, unheard, Khalil al-Masri observed the signing. His network, though disrupted, remained. The seeds of dissent he had sown would continue to sprout, ensuring that the fragile peace would be constantly tested. The treaty was signed. The ink dried on the parchment, sealing the fate of the Holy Land for years to come. Reginald watched, a sense of emptiness washing over him. He had played his part, but at what cost? How much of his honor had he sacrificed in the name of duty? Saladin rose, acknowledging the moment with a solemn nod. He had secured Jerusalem, but he knew the struggle was far from over. The West would return, driven by faith and ambition. He must remain vigilant, ever prepared to defend the holy city. Isabella turned her attention to the future. The coastal cities were hers to rebuild, to fortify, to prepare for the inevitable return of conflict. She would rule wisely, ensuring the survival of her kingdom in the turbulent years to come. Reginald shed his surcoat, the emblem of his service now feeling like a brand. He could no longer reconcile the knight he once was with the spymaster he had become. The shadows had consumed him, leaving him adrift in a world of moral ambiguity. He vanished into the desert, seeking solace in the silence and solitude. The Third Crusade was over, but for Reginald de Courtenay, the war within had just begun. The sands of time would slowly bury the memories of the crusade, but the echoes of espionage and deception would linger, a constant reminder of the shadows that shaped the destiny of the Holy Land. The truce was forged in shadows, and in shadows it would remain, fragile and uncertain, a testament to the complex interplay of power, faith, and betrayal.